The boarding pass was still in her hand when the gate agent ripped it away, replacing her first-class seat with 34B, middle. The humiliation hit harder than the downgrade. Passengers stared. The flight attendant smirked. A smug stranger lounged comfortably in her rightful seat, sipping champagne she had paid for. Sarafina felt the heat rise in her chest, not from shame, but from clarity. They thought she was powerless. They thought her sweatsuit meant insignificance. What they didn't know, what only the reader knows, is that she was the client holding a $300 million contract, and with a single phone call, every career standing over her was about to crumble. The hum of New York's JFK International Airport was a familiar, grating white noise to Sarafina Sterling. It was the sound of controlled chaos, of 1,000 different stories colliding at terminal velocity. Her own story today was one of quiet triumph. She had just spent 72 sleepless hours in a Manhattan high-rise, navigating a hostile takeover that had cemented her company Sterling Dynamics as the undisputed leader in predictive logistics. The deal was done. The ink was dry. All she wanted was to get back to her home in Los Angeles. She stood near gate B24, a picture of deliberate anonymity. She wasn't wearing the sharp, tailored Powers suit she'd worn to destroy a rival's board of directors. Today, she wore her armor of invisibility, a simple charcoal grey cashmere sweatsuit by Laura Piana, a pair of understated leather sneakers, and her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore no makeup. Her only jewelry was a slim black ceramic watch. She looked less like a Fortune 500 CEO, and more like a weary traveler who might have splurged on a comfortable outfit. This was exactly why she bought it. The clothes were worth more than the monthly salary of the man now glaring at her from behind the Arrow West podium. But they didn't scream money. They whispered it. Now boarding first-class passengers in groups 1 and 2, the intercom squawked. Sarafina ended her quiet call with her COO, slid her phone into her pocket, and joined the short line. She was ticketed in 1A, the bulkhead window seat she always booked. It was her mobile office, her sanctuary, her 6-hour bubble of peace. She reached the podium and handed her passport and boarding pass to the gate agent. His name tag read Martin Croft. He had a thin, pinched face and a palpable aura of self-importance. He scanned her pass. Beep. He scanned it again. Beep. 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 A harsh red light flashed on his screen. Martin let out an exasperated sigh, as if Sarafina's ticket had personally insulted him. "Ma'am, there's a problem with your seat," he said, not looking at her, already typing furiously. "A problem." Sarafina kept her voice level. "I checked in this morning. Seat 1A. Well, ma'am, you're not in 1A anymore," Martin said, the mom dripping with condescension. "We had an equipment change. The system reassigned you." Sarafina felt the familiar cold prickle of annoyance. "An equipment change. This is a 7267, just as scheduled." I checked the tail number. Martin finally looked up, his eyes narrowing. He hadn't expected her to know that. "It's a submodel with a different configuration." "Look, you've been reassigned. It's final." Reassigned to where 34B. He snapped his fingers, already printing a flimsy new ticket. Middle seat economy. A flash of heat went through Sarafina's chest. 3 or 44B. A middle seat in the back of the plane, non-relining by the galley. It wasn't just a downgrade. It was an insult. It was a 13-hour drive in a blizzard kind of seat. "That's not acceptable," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I am a fully paid first-class ticket holder. I am an executive platinum flyer. Please check again. There has to be a mistake." "The only mistake," Martin said, his voice rising just enough for others in line to hear, "is you arguing with me. The flight is overbooked. You can either take 34B or you can be rebooked on the 11th to PM red-eye. Your choice. He slid the new ticket toward her, a gesture of dismissal. Just then, a young white man in his late 20s, wearing a loud designer hoodie and a backwards baseball cap, swaggered to the front. He flashed a piece of paper at Martin. "Hey, Marty, am I good?" Martin's entire demeanor changed. "Mr. Peterson, absolutely. You're all set. Go right on ahead." Martin scanned Mr. Peterson's pass. "Beep, a green light. You're in 1A, sir. Enjoy the flight." Serafina froze. "1. The man, Blake." Peterson caught her eye. He shot her a smug wink as if they were in on a joke and sauntered down the jet bridge. Serafina turned back to Martin. The blood was roaring in her ears, but her face was a mask of cold composure. "You just gave him my seat. I don't know what you're talking about," Martin said, his face flushing. "He was ticketed. You weren't. The system bumped you." The system, Serafina repeated. "Or did Marty just give my $2,000 seat to his friend?" "That's an accusation," Martin hissed, leaning forward. "And I don't appreciate it. You're holding up my line. You're delaying this flight." "I am not moving," Serafina said, "until I get the seat I paid for." "Fine." Martin grabbed his walkie-talkie. "I need a supervisor at B-24. I have a passenger refusing to board." "I'm not refusing to board," Serafina corrected him. "I am refusing to be downgraded from first class to a middle seat in economy, while you give my seat away. I'd like to speak to the lead flight attendant on the plane." Now Martin looked at her, then at the line, then at the clock. He was on a power trip, but he was also on a schedule. "Fine, go on, talk to Margaret. She'll tell you the same thing. You're not sitting in first." He waved her on dismissively, as if shooing a fly. Serafina picked up her original boarding pass for 1A. She left the insulting 34B ticket on the counter, a declaration of war. She walked down the jet bridge, her heart pounding a cold, steady rhythm of fury. This was no longer about a seat. It was about respect. And Martin Croft had just made the biggest mistake of his career. The atmosphere inside the aircraft was a stale, recycled chill. Serafina stepped over the threshold into the first-class cabin and was immediately met by a wall of manufactured hospitality. The lead flight attendant, a woman in her mid-50s with a severe blonde bob and a name tag identifying her as Margaret Bishop, was in the galley. She was laughing a high, brittle sound with Blake Peterson, the young man, now comfortably ensconced in seat 1A. He had already kicked off his garish sneakers, and Margaret was in the process of handing him a pre-departure champagne. "And you're sure they won't?" Blake was saying. "Find out." "Oh, please." Margaret said, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "He's my guest. Besides, the original passenger was a no-show. It's all taken care of." Serafina cleared her throat. Margaret turned, her customer service smile snapping into place. But when she saw Serafina, the smile faltered, replaced by a fractional, almost imperceptible sneer. She took in the sweatsuit, the sneakers, the unadorned face. Her eyes instantly catalogued Serafina as other, as not one of us. "Can I help you, miss?" Margaret asked. Her tone suggested she very much doubted it. "Economy boarding is down the center aisle to the rear." Serafina ignored the directive. She walked the few steps to seat 1A and addressed Blake directly. "Excuse me. I believe you are in my seat." Blake looked up from his champagne, annoyed. No. This is my seat. Boarding pass says 1A." "That's impossible," Serafina said, holding up her own pass. "Because this is my boarding pass for 1A purchased 3 weeks ago." Margaret stepped between them, placing a proprietary hand on the back of the seat, as if to guard it. "Mum," she said, and the word was a weapon. "I'm going to have to ask you to move along. This gentleman is our guest and his pass is valid. The agent outside clearly gave you a new seat assignment. The agent outside Serafina said her voice, dangerously quiet, is colluding with you. He gave my seat to his friend and tried to put me in 34B. Margaret's painted-on smile became a tight, angry line. The whispers in the cabin ceased. The other first-class passengers, businessmen, in suits, a woman with a small dog, were all watching. "Now you listen to me," Margaret said, dropping all pretense of service. "I don't know what kind of game you're trying to play. People like you try this all the time. You think you can just walk up to first class and claim a seat. It doesn't work that way. Your ticket was reissued. The system is the system." "People like me," Serafina echoed. The phrase hung in the air thick and toxic. "You mean black women or women in sweatwits? Which people are you referring to?" Margaret flushed a deep, blotchy red. "I mean people who don't have a valid ticket. This is a full flight. Now you can either go to 34B or you can get off this plane. You are holding up our departure." Just then, Martin Croft, the gate agent, stormed onto the plane. "Is there a problem here?" "Margaret, yes, Martin." Margaret said, vindication in her voice. "This woman is harassing my passenger. She's refusing to take her assigned seat." "I am not refusing," Serafina stated, her patience evaporating. "I am correcting. I am the CEO of Sterling Dynamics. I am a top-tier million-mile flyer with this airline. I am on my way to a critical meeting in Los Angeles, and I will not be spoken to like a criminal, nor will I be relegated to a middle seat in economy, because you and Martin decided to run a little scam." The mention of CEO only made it worse. It was to them so unbelievable, so outside their worldview, that it could only be a lie. Margaret Bishop let out a short, ugly laugh. It was a bark of genuine derisive amusement. "A COO," she mocked, her voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Honey, in that outfit, I've seen more CEO in my nephew's garage band. You're delusional." She turned to Martin. "She's claiming to be a CEO. Can you believe it?" Martin smirked. "Ma'am, I don't care if you're the Queen of England. Your ticket says 34B. Now I am giving you one final chance. Walk to the back of this plane and sit down, or I will call Port Authority police and have you removed for interfering with a flight crew." The threat was real. The humiliation was absolute. Every eye was on her. Serafina knew this was a battle she could not win in this arena. If she argued, they would call security. A video of a black woman being dragged off a plane by police, regardless of the reason, would be a PR nightmare for her company, for the New Deal. She had to lose this battle to win the war. She looked at Margaret, whose face was smug with victory. She looked at Martin, who had his hand on his walkie-talkie, itching to make the call. She looked at Blake in 1A, who was filming the entire thing on his phone, a stupid grin on his face. "You are making a grave mistake," Serafina said, her voice a low promise. "The only mistake," Margaret shot back, "was you thinking you belonged up here in the first place. Now get out of my cabin." The word "get out" echoed in the small pressurized space. It was a command laced with years of pent-up resentment, a dismissal of everything Serafina was and had achieved. Serafina held Margaret's gaze. She could see the woman's entire life story in that one hateful look, the decades of serving people she resented, the petty power trips that were the only compensation for a life of disappointment. And today, she had chosen Serafina as the target for that bitterness. "You want me to get off the plane?" Serafina asked, her voice calm. "I want you in 34B, or I want you off this aircraft. You have 10 seconds to decide." Martin snapped his hand, tightening on his radio. I won't be sitting in 34B, Sarafina said simply. Then you're off, Martin declared, a note of triumph in his voice. Margaret, call the captain. Tell him we're removing a disruptive passenger. My pleasure, Margaret said, turning toward the cockpit. That won't be necessary. Sarafina held up her hand. The entire cabin was silent, save for the hum of the auxiliary power. I'll deplane voluntarily. Margaret and Martin exchanged a look of surprised, smug relief. They had won. The problem was removing itself. Sarafina turned her movements deliberate, not rushed. She was not fleeing in shame. She was executing a tactical retreat. She walked the few steps to the open aircraft door, the blue carpeted jet bridge waiting beyond. She paused at the threshold, 1 foot in the cabin, 1 foot out. She turned back to the 2 employees who were already composing their triumphant report. Before I go, she said, her tone conversational. I need to make sure I have the details correct for my report. She looked at Martin. You are Martin Croft, he said, puffing his chest out. Lead gate agent? C-R-O-F-T. Make sure you spell it right in your little complaint. It'll go right in the shredder. Martin Croft Sarafina repeated as if committing it to memory. Got it. She then turned her gaze to Margaret. And you are Margaret Bishop, the flight attendant, said, crossing her arms. B-I-S-H-O-P, lead purser. And I'll be filing my own report about your disruptive and threatening behavior. So good luck with that. Margaret Bishop, Sarafina echoed. She gave a single sharp nod. Thank you. She looked past them at the other 2 first-class flight attendants, who had stood by, watching, saying nothing. She locked eyes with each of them. Their silent complicity was just as damning. I'm sure, Sarafina said, her voice carrying through the cabin, that Aero West will be very interested in this. Aero West thanks you for your compliance. Martin sneered. Now please leave. Sarafina stepped off the plane. The heavy thud and whoosh of the aircraft door ceiling behind her was the sound of a gauntlet being thrown. She heard the locks engage. She was alone on the jet bridge. She didn't walk back to the gate in a huff. She didn't stomp or cry. She walked slowly, her mind already shifting from defense to offense. Martin Croft and Margaret Bishop thought they had just disposed of a minor annoyance. They had no idea they had just sealed their own fate. She reached the gate area. The few remaining economy passengers were filing on. The new gate agent, a younger woman who had taken over for Martin, was avoiding her gaze. Sarafina sat down in one of the hard plastic seats at gate B24. She looked at the large digital clock on the wall. It was 3:15 p.m. The flight Aero West 2, TO2, was scheduled to depart at 3:25 p.m. She pulled out her iPhone. She didn't go to the Aero West app. She didn't dial the 1-800 customer service number. She opened her favorites. Her thumb hovered over a name. Robert Pullman, Aero West CEO. She had his number because she was at that very moment in the final stages of closing a $300 million 5-year exclusive corporate travel contract with his airline. Her company Sterling Dynamics had over 20,000 employees who traveled globally. This contract was set to make Aero West the primary carrier for all of them. It was a deal that Robert Pullman had personally told her would save their 4th quarter and secure the airline's future against its larger competitors, Delta and American. She pressed the call button. The phone rang exactly once. Robert Pullman, CEO of Aero West, always picked up for Sarafina Sterling. Sarafina, my star client. His voice was booming and cheerful. Are you in the air? Did you see the final draft? I think we're ready to sign. The new LA to Singapore route is all yours, Robert Sarafina said. Her voice was pure ice. It cut through his boardroom schmoo instantly. I am not in the air. A pause. The cheerfulness vanished. What's wrong? Are you okay? Did you miss the flight I'm sitting at? Gate B24 at JFK. Sarafina said, her eyes fixed on the clock. 3:16 p.m. I was just removed from your flight 212. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. She could hear the faint sound of a pen dropping on a desk. Removed, Pullman's voice was a strangled whisper. What do you mean, removed? A mechanical issue? A security threat? I was removed by your gate agent, Martin Croft, and your lead flight attendant, Margaret Bishop. But why? Because Sarafina said her voice level. I am a CEO in a sweatuit, and I didn't belong in first class. They gave my confirmed paid-for seat 1A to a friend of theirs. Then they tried to force me into a middle seat in economy. When I refused the downgrade, they called security to have me forcibly removed from the aircraft for being disruptive. She could hear Pullman breathing. It was fast, shallow, and panicked. Sarafina. No, that's impossible. You are our highest priority, non-military contract passenger. Your profile is flagged with so many alerts. They should be rolling out a red carpet. The only thing they rolled out, Robert, was a threat. The door to the plane closed 1 minute ago. The clock on the wall read 3-1 quarantine. A muffled sound came through the phone, a fist slamming on a desk. Then Pullman's voice no longer addressing her, but shouting at someone else in his office. Get me! Oops! Now get me the JFK station manager. I don't care if he's in a meeting. Get him on the line. I want Aero West, flight 212. Gate B24 stopped. A new voice, female, presumably his assistant. So flight 212 just pushed back from the gate. I don't care, Pullman roared. I don't care if it's on the taxiway. I don't care if it's second in line for takeoff. Recall that plane. Get it back to the gate. Recall it now. Sarafina listened to the muffled chaos. She looked through the large terminal window. The massive 767, its engines whining, had indeed pushed back. It was starting its slow pivot toward the taxiway. Robert, she said calmly. The plane is moving. They're on it, Sarafina. Stay on the line. Do not move. I am God. I am so sorry. We are handling this. The clock ticked. 3:18 p.m. The plane stopped its pivot. It just sat motionless on the tarmac. 3:09 p.m. Sarafina saw a flurry of activity at the gate agent's desk. The young woman who had taken over looked at her phone, her eyes going wide with terror. She began typing her hands, visibly shaking. 3:20 p.m. Another man, this one, in a better cut suit, sprinted up to the gate. He looked flustered, his tie askew. He joined the young woman, and they both began speaking frantically into their phones. 3:22 p.m. The hum of the engines outside changed pitch. Sarafina watched a grim satisfaction settling in as the Aero West 767, which had been moments from departure, began to move. It wasn't moving forward. It was crawling backward. A lumbering beast being dragged back to its leash. A tug was reattaching, guiding it back to the terminal. 3:24 p.m. The jet bridge, which had been retracted, slowly began to extend again, its metal mouth reaching out to reattach to the aircraft. The on-time sign above the gate flickered and changed to delayed. Robert Pullman came back on the line, breathless. The plane is back at the gate. Sarafina, the station manager, David Chen, is meeting you on the jet bridge. He has his orders. What are his orders, Robert? Sarafina asked. To give you anything you want. Pullman said, his voice grim. Anything. Just please don't tear up that contract. The 9 minutes were up. Sarafina stood, smoothed the front of her cashmere top, and walked toward the jet bridge, where the aircraft door was just beginning to unseal. The whoosh of the plane door opening was like a gasp. David Chen, the JFK station manager, was waiting for Sarafina on the jet bridge. He was pale and sweating. M. Sterling, he said, his voice trembling. I, Ms. Sterling. I am David Chen. On behalf of Aero West, there are no words. I am so deeply sorry. Mr. Pullman is on my direct line. Please come with me." Sarafina gave a curtain nod and followed him onto the aircraft. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had curdled. The passengers were grumbling, confused and angry about the delay. Margaret Bishop was standing by the door, her face a mask of confusion and indignation. "David, what is going on? Why are we back at the gate? We're going to miss our slot. I had to remove that woman." Her voice died in her throat when she saw Sarafina standing right behind him. Martin Croft had run back down the jet bridge from the gate. "What's the meaning of this? We have a schedule." "This is a federal violation. Calling a plane back for David Chen spun on them. His terror replaced by a sudden protective fury. The $300 million contract was his responsibility. His career was on this plane. You hestled at Martin. You're Martin Croft. I'm the lead gate agent. Yes, and you." He rounded on Margaret, a Margaret Bishop. "I'm the lead purser on this flight, and I'm telling you, you're both fired." The words, sharp and final, cut through the cabin noise. Blake Peterson in 1A actually lowered his phone. "Fired, Martin," shouted his voice, cracking. "You can't fire us. We're union. You have no grounds. I have every ground." David shot back, holding up his vibrating phone. "This is Robert Pullman, the CEO of Arrow West. He is on this line live with legal. He has invoked the gross misconduct and brand damage clause in your contracts. He pointed at Margaret, violated FAA regulations by giving a non-ticked passenger a seat in first class. He pointed at Martin, falsified a boarding document, and defrauded the company. And you both subjected a premier client to harassment and discrimination." Margaret's face crumpled. The smugness evaporated, replaced by a sickly grey panic. "No, he was my guest. It was an empty seat. The system, Sarafina, said her voice, cutting through, said the seat belonged to me." She stepped fully into the cabin. All eyes were on her. The woman in the sweatwit now looked less like a victim and more like an executioner. "This woman David Chen said, his voice shaking with rage, is Sarafina Sterling. She is the CEO of Sterling Dynamics, and Sterling Dynamics is, or was about to sign a $300 million contract with this airline, a contract that you two just lit on fire." A collective gasp went through the cabin. The businessman in 2C, who had been watching with detached amusement, now looked horrified. He knew exactly who Sterling Dynamics was. Margaret looked at Sarafina, her eyes wide with disbelief. "CEO, no." "But you thought I didn't belong," Sarafina said quietly. "You were right. I don't belong on an airline that employs people like you. Get them off this plane." David ordered 2 other crew members. "Now Port Authority is waiting at the gate to escort you from the premises. Your credentials are revoked. Hand them over." Martin was sputtering. This is illegal. I'll sue." "Get in line," David snapped. As a security officer boarded to remove them, Sarafina turned to David. "Them too?" David paused. Then Sarafina motioned to the other 2 first-class flight attendants, who were now pretending to be busy with the beverage cart. The entire crew. They stood there. They watched. They said nothing. They were complicit. I will not fly with a single person who witnessed that and did nothing. I want a new crew. David Chen, seeing a sliver of hope that he could save the situation, nodded frantically. "Done. Absolutely. We'll get a new crew. The flight will be delayed by 2 hours, Miss Sterling, but we will get you to Los Angeles. Please take your seat." He turned to Blake Peterson. "And you, sir, you are not a ticketed passenger. You need to deplane now." Blake, who had been frozen, scrambled to grab his shoes. "Hey, I didn't do anything." She gave me the seat. "Out!" David roared. Blake scrambled out of 1A, rushing past the security officers, and vanished down the jet bridge. The cabin was in chaos. The crew was being removed. Martin and Margaret, their faces straight with tears and rage, were being escorted off. David Chen turned back to Serafina, his smile obsequious. "Mrs. Sterling, please. Seat 1A is ready for you. We will have a new crew here in 30 minutes. Serafina looked at the empty seat. She looked at the humiliated, stunned faces of the remaining passengers, and she looked at David, a man willing to do anything to appease her, now that he knew her value. "I'm not taking this flight, David," she said. His face fell. "But Miss Sterling, we're fixing it. You're fixing the symptom," Serafina said. "Not the disease. I have a meeting in LA. A very important meeting with Goldman Sachs. I'll be taking a private jet, but I will be telling them why I'm late. I wonder how they'll feel when I tell them that Aero West's official policy is that a black woman in a sweatsuit belongs in 34B. No, that's not our policy. It was them. It was Margaret and Martin. They were your policy," Serafina said. She turned and walked off the plane, leaving behind a grounded aircraft, a panicked stations manager, and the complete and total wreckage of 4 careers. The entire incident, from her scanning her ticket to her walking off the second time, had taken less than an hour. But the real fallout was just beginning. 2 hours later, Serafina was not at JFK. She was in a sterile, impossibly quiet lounge at Teterboro Airport, the hub for private aviation. Robert Pullman was sitting across from her. He had not flown in on a commercial jet. He had scrambled his own company's Gulfstream Glex 50 from Chicago the moment he'd hung up with her. He looked haggarded, his $3,000 suit wrinkled. "Serafina," he said, his voice raw. "I don't even know where to begin. Apology doesn't cover it. Devastated doesn't come close. It was ugly," Robert Serafina said, sipping a bottle of water. Her own jet was being fueled, her LA meeting rescheduled. "They're gone," Pullman said, leaning forward, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Martin Croft, Margaret Bishop, the 2 other complicit attendants, all terminated for cause. "We're launching a full internal investigation into the JFK station. It appears this wasn't the first time. There are other irregularities with their manifests." "It never is," Serafina said. "Bigotry is a habit, not a one-time mistake." "Please," Pullman said, and she could hear the desperation in his voice. This wasn't a CIO to a client. This was a man begging for the life of his company. "The $300 million contract. It's not just the money, Serafina. You know our market position. We are fighting Delta and American for every single corporate account. You are our flagship. You are our proof of concept. If Sterling Dynamics drops us, if you walk, the word will be out that Aero West is toxic. It won't just hurt our stock. It could put us in Chapter 11. This was the real leverage. It wasn't just about her pride. It was about the future of an entire 50,000-employee airline. She held that power in her hand. "And what message does it send if I stay?" she asked, her voice cold. "That a CEO can get justice because she has the CEO on speed dial, but a regular passenger, a nurse, a teacher, a soldier, has to just sit in 34-4B and swallow the racism." "No," Pullman said, jumping on the opening. "No, we'll use this. We'll do the opposite. We will make this a case study. We will make you the face of our new zero tolerance, zero biases policy. We'll fund a scholarship in Sterling Dynamics' name. We will overhaul our entire customer service training from the ground up, top to bottom. You will have oversight. You can name your terms." Serafina was quiet for a long moment. She saw the path. She could walk away, costing them the $300 million, and likely bankrupting them. The revenge would be sweet but fleeting. Or she could do something else. She could use her power not just to punish, but to change. "Fine," she said. "You don't lose the contract." Pullman almost collapsed in relief. "Oh, thank God. Sarafina, you won't." "You re-earn it?" she interrupted, holding up her hand. "Here are my terms, and they are not negotiable. Anything. One, I want a full independent third-party audit of all discrimination and bias complaints filed against Arrow West for the past 5 years. And I want the unredacted results published for your shareholders and the public." Pullman blanched but nodded. "Done." 2. My diversity, equity and inclusion team at Sterling Dynamics will design your new company-wide bias training program. It will be mandatory from the baggage handlers to the boardroom, including you, and it will be implemented within 6 months. "Done," he said more firmly. "And 3, she said, leaning in. 10% of the contract's value, $30 million, will be diverted. It will no longer go to Arrow West. It will go into a new fund administered by my foundation to provide grants and seed capital for minority and women-owned businesses in the aviation and travel sectors." Pullman looked at her. That was $30 million in pure profit. Gone. He didn't hesitate for more than a second. "Done." "That is how you keep my business," Robert Sarafina said. "You don't just fire the racists. You build an airline that is structurally incapable of creating them in the first place." She stood up. Her jet was ready. "I'll see you in LA. Robert, the firing in 9 minutes hadn't just been a firing. It was a corporate restructuring. It was a hostile takeover of their entire company culture. And the real karma for the people who started it was only just beginning. The Aero West Sterling initiative was a master stroke of public relations. 6 months after the incident at Gate B-24, the airline industry trade publications were lauding the partnership. Forbes ran a feature on Sarafina Sterling, not as a victim, but as a corporate visionary who was turning a $300 million contract into a lever for systemic change. The article praised Robert Pullman for his courageous transparency in embracing the new Sterling-designed corporate bias training. The story of a black CEO being denied her seat was never leaked. It was scrubbed, classified, and buried under the weight of a joint non-disclosure agreement and a mountain of positive press. To the world, Arrow West was the new gold standard in equitable corporate travel. But Justice Sarafina knew operated on 2 ledgers, the public one written in the ink of press releases, and the private one written in the acid of consequence. While the world saw a partnership, Sarafina and the Arrow West legal team were focused on the karmic bill that was coming due. It began, as it often does, with a single, sputtering flame of arrogance that refused to be extinguished. Martin Croft, the former gate agent, had simply vanished. His termination for cause, flagged in the shared airline employment database, made him radioactive. He couldn't get a job at Delta. He couldn't get a job at American. He couldn't even get a call back from a budget carrier. The union he had so proudly hidden behind had reviewed the case, seen the irrefutable evidence of his manifest falsification, and quietly declined to represent him. His blacklisting was absolute. He had lost his apartment in Queens. His car was repossessed. He was at 42 years old, sleeping on a fold-out sofa in his sister's living room in suburban New Jersey. His days spent sending out resumes that went into an electronic void. His evenings were spent simmering in a toxic stew of resentment, nursing a cheap beer and scrolling through articles praising Sarafina Sterling. He still told himself, and anyone who would listen, that she had ruined his life over a simple mistake. The real story, the true unspooling of the karma, began with Margaret Bishop. Margaret, unlike Martin, had not gone quietly. She was a 28-year veteran of the airline. She had seniority, a pension on the line, and a deep, seething core of self-righteousness. She believed with the conviction of a zealot that she was the victim. She had been made an example of to appease a power-mad, spoiled CEO who, in her mind, had probably gotten her fancy sweatsuit out of a donation bin. 3 months after her firing, Margaret Bishop walked into the low-rent offices of Arthur Jenkins Escortus, a personal injury lawyer whose face was plastered on the back of city buses under the slogan, "Wronged at work. Get what you're owed. It's a slam dunk," Maggie Arthur said, leaning back in his creaking chair. He was a man who sweated cheap cologne. This is a classic case. Wrongful termination, age discrimination. They're trying to replace you with younger, cheaper staff. And defamation. They had you escorted off that plane like a common criminal in front of passengers. They ruined me, Margaret said, her voice trembling with manufactured rage. My reputation, my pension. 28 yours, Arthur. Thrown away. And we are going to make them pay for every single one, Arthur said, his eyes gleaming. Arrow West is terrified of bad press. They're trying to look all new and inclusive with this sterling deal. The last thing they want is a lawsuit from a loyal 28-year employee exposing them as hypocrites. They'll settle this before it ever sees a courtroom. We're not asking Maggie. We're telling, $5 million and you get your pension. Yes, Margaret said, a thin, vindictive smile spreading across her face. $5 million for the humiliation. The lawsuit was filed in the New York State Supreme Court the following Monday. When the notification landed on the desk of Robert Pullman, the Arrow West CEO, he didn't feel dread. He felt a cold, sharp spike of fury. He immediately forwarded it to Elena Shaw, his general counsel, with a 1S sentence memo. Unleash hell. Elena Shaw was not a bus advertisement lawyer. She was a 200 an hour corporate litigator who had personally negotiated multi-billion-dollar aviation contracts. She viewed a lawsuit not as a threat, but as a weapon. She's suing us, Eleanor said, a dangerous smile in her voice during a call with Pullman. Robert, this is a gift. This is a Christmas comes early, wrapped in a bow gift. What do you mean? Pullman asked. As long as we were just the employer, our options were limited. Firing her was the end of it. We couldn't go after her without looking vindictive. But she is suing us for defamation, wrongful termination, and ageism. In doing so, she has opened the door to the legal process of discovery. She is claiming we are the ones who are lying. To defend ourselves, we are now legally entitled to prove that her termination was not justified, but that it was, in fact, the only possible outcome for an employee engaged in criminal activity. Criminal Pullman paused. We knew it was bad, Eleanor. But criminal, she opened the door. Robert, Eleanor said, her voice dropping. I'm going to walk through it. She wants to claim her reputation was damaged. I'm going to find out, under oath, what that reputation was actually worth. I want every text message, every email, every bank statement, every phone record for the last 5 years. My team is already drafting the subpoenas. This won't be a settlement, Robert. This will be an execution. The discovery process was not a negotiation. It was an autopsy. A team of 20 associates at Eleanor's firm descended on 5 years of Margaret Bishop's life. They cross-referenced her work rosters with the manifests for every flight she had ever worked. They subpoenaed her personal bank records. They pulled her and Martin Croft's instant message logs from the internal company servers. A young, hungry associate named Ben Keller, 3 weeks into the document review, hit the jackpot. M. Shaw, he said, walking into a corner office, his face pale. You need to see this. He laid out 2 spreadsheets. One was a list of cash deposits made into Margaret Bishop's personal checking account, all at an ATM near her home in Long Island. The other was her work schedule. "They're a perfect match," Ben said, his finger tracing a line. "Every flight she worked on the JFK LAX or JFK SFO route, a cash deposit was made the following morning. $500, $1,000, sometimes $1,500 like clockwork, for 3 years. She was taking cash tips," Elena said, unimpressed. "It's a violation of policy, but it's not." "No," Ben said, holding up a second file. "It's not tips. I pulled the passenger manifests for those same flights. Then I cross-referenced them with the gate agent logs, specifically Martin Croft's logs." He pointed to a name, Sarafina Sterling, seat 1A, reassigned by M. Croft to 34B. Reason code duplicate booking. He pointed to the next one. Jinwoo Kim, seat 2C, reassigned by M. Croft to 31F. Reason code duplicate booking. He pointed again. Amara Diallo, seat 1F, reassigned. Elena Rodriguez, seat 3A, reassigned. It's a pattern. Hundreds of them. The original passengers were all minorities, non-native English speakers, or anyone with a non-Western name. They were profiled. Martin would flag their paid-for first-class ticket, bump them to the back of the plane, and tell them it was a computer glitch. Then Ben pulled up the third file. Then Margaret Bishop, in the first-class cabin, would find a passenger on the standby list or in economy, and she would sell them that miraculously open seat for a cash upgrade fee. We cross-referenced the names of the bumped passengers with the names of the passengers who took their seats. And look who pops up 5 different times, including on M. Sterling's flight. Eleanor leaned in. Blake Peterson. He was a regular customer. Ben said he wasn't a friend. He was a client. This wasn't a one-time mistake with Sarafina Sterling. This was a criminal conspiracy. They were running a 3-year racist profiling cache for seat scam. And based on these deposits, they stole at minimum over $200,000 from the airline and its passengers. Eleanor Shaw sat back, a slow, cold smile spreading across her face. "Get me the district attorney's office and schedule Margaret Bishop's deposition. I want to see her face when she realizes her $5 million lawsuit just turned into a criminal indictment." The deposition took place in a sterile grey conference room. Margaret Bishop arrived with Arthur Jenkins, both of them looking confident, even smug. They believed they were there to discuss a settlement. Across the long, polished table sat Elena Shaw, flanked by 2 associates and a court reporter. For an hour, Eleanor was polite. She asked about Margaret's 28-year history, her commendations, her family. She let Margaret and Arthur build their entire case. "And you believe Eleanor said that your termination was a direct result of age discrimination?" "Absolutely," Margaret said, crossing her arms. "They wanted me out. The incident with Ms. Sterling was just an excuse. She overreacted, and they saw a chance to get rid of a senior salary employee. And you claimed defamation, that your reputation was harmed. They treated me like a criminal." Margaret said, her voice rising. "They fired the entire crew. It was humiliating. They ruined my good name." "Your good name," Eleanor repeated softly. She paused, then looked at the court reporter. "We are now moving to Exhibit A." She slid a thick bound document across the table. "Miss Bishop, this is a certified copy of your personal bank statements for the last 36 months. Could you please turn to page 14 and explain this cash deposit for $1,000 made on Arthur Jenkins immediately sat up?" "Objection. This is harassment. My client's personal finances are irrelevant to a wrongful termination suit." On the contrary, counsel, Eleanor said, her voice like ice. "They are the only thing that is relevant. Your client has claimed her termination was baseless. I am here to prove that her termination was not only for cause, but that Arrow West would have been negligent not to terminate her. This is a fraud investigation, counselor, and your client's lawsuit demanded it. The objection is noted. Ms. Bishop, the deposit." Margaret's face had gone pale. I don't recall. It could be anything. A gift. A gift, Eleanor mused. How lovely. Let's look at Exhibit B. She slid a stack of photographs across the table. "This is you, Miss Bishop, at a Chase ATM at 9:15 a.m. on the morning in question. The day after you worked, a West Flight 112, the flight on which she slid over another document. Mr. the Hanjun Park was involuntarily downgraded from seat 3A to 29E, and Mr. Thomas Richardson was moved from economy into seat 3A. Did Mr. Richardson give you a gift, Miss Bishop? I don't know what you're talking about," Margaret stammered. "Perhaps this will refresh your memory." Eleanor held up a single sheet of paper. It was a transcript of text messages. "This is a text from your phone to Mr. Martin Croft, dated 3 weeks before the Sterling incident. It reads, 'Marty the 400 p.m. LAX is loaded. I've got a live one in 12C who wants to move up. See if you can glitch 2A. The passenger is an old Asian lady. She won't make a sound. 500 for you if it clears.'" Arthur Jenkins made a gagging sound. Margaret Bishop stared at the paper as if it were a snake. The blood drained from her face, leaving a sickly, mottled grey. She was completely, totally silent. "Your reply, Martin Croft," Eleanor continued. "Read. Done. She's in 34B. Easy money. Make sure you get cash. My kid's tuition is due." Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, vicious whisper. "You weren't fired for your age, Margaret. You weren't defamed. You were fired because you are a thief. You were fired because you are the ringleader of a criminal conspiracy systematically targeting minorities and defrauding this company. You built your good name on a foundation of racism and grand larceny. You she tapped the bank statements are a criminal. Arthur." Margaret whispered, her hands shaking. "Arthur, do something." Arthur Jenkins was stuffing his own papers into his briefcase, his face ashen. "This deposition is over. We're taking a recess." "By all means, Counselor. Take a recess," Eleanor Shaw said, standing up. "Because my next call is to the Queen's District Attorney, who is very, very interested in this evidence. Your client's $5 million lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice." "And you," she said, looking down at the crumpled, weeping woman, "are going to need a very, very good criminal lawyer." Margaret's lawsuit was the key that unlocked their prison. The DA's office, armed with the mountain of evidence Arrow West provided, moved instantly. Martin Croft was arrested 2 days later. He wasn't at home. He was in the food court at LAX, where he had finally found a job wiping down tables. 2 uniformed officers walked up to him, mid-shift cuffed him, and walked him out past the ticket counters of the airlines that had blacklisted him. A final, crushing humiliation. The sentencing was scheduled for a cold grey Tuesday 1 year to the day after the incident at Gate B24. Sarafina Sterling was in New York for a board meeting. She made a detour to the Queens County Courthouse. She wasn't a witness. The evidence was so overwhelming the DA needed to call her. She was just an observer. She walked into the drab, wood-paneled courtroom and took a seat in the back row. She wasn't in a sweatwit. She wore a bespoke, razor-sharp navy blue suit by Tom Ford. She was the personification of the power they had failed to see. Then they were led in. Martin Croft was gaunt. He had lost 30, and his cheap, oversized suit hung on him. He saw Sarafina, and his eyes widened in a flash of recognition, followed by a pathetic, cringing shame. He looked away instantly. Margaret Bishop looked like she had aged 20 years. Her severe blonde bob was gone, replaced by stringy greying hair. Her face was puffy and ruined from a year of crying and fear. She and Martin had both taken plea deals. The evidence was insurmountable. When Margaret saw Serafina, she didn't look away. She just stared. Her eyes were dead. But in them, Serafina could see the final, horrifying realization. This was the woman. This was the nobody in the sweatsuit. This was the CEO she had mocked. This was the woman who, without ever raising her voice, had been the architect of her complete and total ruin. The judge read his statement, his voice devoid of emotion. This was not a crime of passion. It was a calculated, repeated, and cynical abuse of power. You targeted people you believed were powerless people who wouldn't complain, people you assumed didn't belong. You used your positions of authority, not to serve, but to harass, profile, and steal. The damage you did to your employer is immense, but the damage you did to the public trust is worse. He looked at Martin. Mr. Croft, for your role in this conspiracy for grand larceny and wire fraud, you are sentenced to 18 months in state prison. Martin collapsed into his chair, sobbing. The judge then turned to Margaret. Ms. Bishop is the clear ringleader of this operation, and for the same charges, you are sentenced to 3 years in the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women. A low animal wail escaped Margaret's throat. It was the sound of a life ending. The hard karma wasn't just losing a job. It wasn't just being embarrassed. It was this. It was the cold, hard, real-life consequence of their actions. They hadn't just given up a $2,000 seat. They had, in their arrogance, traded their freedom, their futures, and their lives. All because they looked at Serafina Sterling and decided in that one fatal moment that she didn't belong. Serafina Sterling stood up. She straightened her suit jacket. She gave a single brief nod to Robert Pullman, who was sitting in the front row, and then walked out of the courtroom. The heavy door clicked shut behind her. The sound of a ledger being closed, balanced and paid in full. The story of Serafina Sterling is a powerful, real-life reminder that you should never ever judge a book by its cover. What Margaret and Martin saw was a woman in a sweatsuit. What they didn't see was the power, the intelligence, and the billion-dollar corporation standing behind her. They thought they were just downgrading a passenger. They were actually ending their careers and their freedom. This is the ultimate story of karma. What goes around doesn't just come around. It comes back with a force you can never predict. What did you think of Margaret and Martin's ultimate fate? Was it justice, or was it more than they deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of drama and sweet, sweet karma, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more true life stories where the arrogant get exactly what's coming to them.